It's an interesting moment in commodities generally, not thinking just about food. There has been perhaps a symbolic moment this last week with Glencore, a company which was privately run, which dealt in commodities, minerals, foodstuffs as well, putting itself up for public flotation, valued at something like, if it goes to plan, $40 billion. An enormous amount of money. It's going to make at least 5 members of that company, partners of that company, billionaires overnight. Does that to you seem like hubris, like we are reaching a point in this commodities supercycle that is not sustainable?
Well, you obviously take note when something like that happens. Glencore is smarter than I am. If they decide to sell, maybe it's time for other people to think about it. But remember, Lehman Brothers went public, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch. It was not the end of the financial bull market.
Well, I do remember Lehman Brothers went public, and Lehman Brothers, not so long after, went bust.
No. When they went public, then several years later.
Yeah, of course, but that's the point, isn't it? I mean, you are a man who has, throughout your career, tried to be ahead of the curve. I come back to my opening thought. I just wonder now whether the curve is that this commodities supercycle cannot be sustained.
All bull markets come to an end. This bull market will come to an end. But, Stephen, where's the food? There are no farmers. The inventories of food are very low. The IEA, the International Energy Agency, says that the world's known reserves of oil are declining at the rate of 6% a year.
So you see only
one
way for oil prices, do you?
For the foreseeable future, yes. No, not one way. There will be reactions. There will be corrections.
Well, it's well over $100 a barrel now. How high is it going to go, in your view?
Oh, during the course of the bull market, during the next 10 years? 150, 200, you pick the number. I don't know. It's going to go beyond anybody's expectations, including mine, and I'm the bull. Well, but there will be corrections along the way.
You're just saying something absolutely catastrophic for the world economy. At least think of it from the American point of view. If oil goes up to $200 a barrel, what's that going to do to the U.S. economy?
Things will slow down. We've had slowdowns in America. Now, America's in serious trouble. There's no question that $200 oil will hurt America in many ways. It's going to hurt a lot of people. But some people will benefit, Stephen. Remember, it's not just, there are lots of people out there in the world. Somebody's always benefiting and somebody's always suffering.
Yeah, I mean, not to labor the point, but right now many people feel the people who are benefiting most are the speculators in commodities.
I know that's probably great on TV and politicians like it too, but if you don't have investment in the oil industry, where are we going to get the oil? Where's the oil going to come from? We can't just sit here at the BBC and say, boy, this is terrible. We don't have any oil. And you're going to magically make some oil? No, somebody has to invest in the oil industry in order to get some oil.
Sure.
Politicians, you know what they're going to do? They'll put on extra taxes and everything else. That's not going to put any petrol in your gas tank. That's not going to put any petrol in your petrol tank. It's going to make the situation worse.
Let's just talk a little more about America, because the flip side of everything we've discussed, your conviction that the 21st century is about the East, is about Asia and China front and central. The flip side of it is that you seem to believe that the US economic growth story is finished. It's over. Whatever the US does from now on, it cannot restore the kind of growth we saw in the past.
Stephen, the facts are that the United States is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. Now, go back and look at the history. Nobody that's gotten themselves into that kind of situation has gotten out without problems, without a crisis or a semi-crisis. I don't like saying that. I'm an American taxpayer, but the facts are...
An American who chooses to live in Singapore and raises your children to speak Mandarin. You've clearly voted with your feet.
Well, but I'm still an American citizen. I still pay American taxes. There's no question. Parents do a lot of things for their children. I want my children to be educated in Asia. There's absolutely no question about that. I hope that you do what you think is best for your children. I hope everybody watching this show does. I think it's best for my children to know Asia and to learn Mandarin.
No, it's fascinating to me you say that. I just wonder whether, you know, I asked you whether you felt perhaps you were overestimating Asia's capacity over the next century, whether maybe you're underestimating America's resilience. If you think about certain assets America has, the world's top universities, Silicon Valley, the greatest high-tech industry in the world, if you think about these sorts of things, and actually a demographic dynamism that China doesn't have, isn't America well placed to bounce back?
It's the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. I went to some of those universities. I know they have great PR, but listen, do you know it costs $400,000 to go to Princeton for 4 years now? It's not worth it, I assure you. I went to a fancy Ivy League school. It's wonderful, had a great time. But please, this whole thing about American tertiary education, that's a bubble. That's an absurd statement.
Yeah, but I lived in the States not so long ago when Bill Clinton was year after year running a budget surplus. I mean, yes, they've got a serious public debt crisis right now, but you're so convinced of your Asia story that you seem to be determined to do down America's potential.
Well, first of all, if you kept your books the way Bill Clinton kept his books, you would be in jail. You and I would be in jail if we kept our books. Yeah, he reported a surplus. Please, I promise you want to go to jail, you pull the same tricks. The facts are we're the largest debtor nation in the world, in the history of the world, and the debt's getting worse and worse.
You keep telling me that.
But wait, Stephen, throughout history, just go back and look. Throughout history, when you get into that kind of situation, you have a serious problem.
Do you think the publics in the West get it? Because you know, you're not just a commodity speculator, you're a currency speculator too. You make bets on currencies, and if one looks at the dollar, one looks at the euro as well. Do you think that the publics and the politicians of European countries and the United States get it in terms of the way they need to rebalance their economies?
No, of course they don't. The head of the central bank in America doesn't have a clue about currencies. You should see some of his testimony under oath. So either the man is not a liar because he's under oath. So he really, you know, he doesn't have a clue about currencies. And if the head of the central bank doesn't understand currencies, I assure you, most other people don't either.
So to stick with the dollar first, then we'll talk about the euro. But in terms of the dollar, do you feel that it is bound to lose its status as the world's reserve currency?
Absolutely. I mean,
how quickly?
Maybe over the next 5 years, maybe over the next 5 months, from the way things are going.
But
many people are already
that quickly because there's no alternative. What's the alternative?
People are already trying to find it, as you know.
Well, they haven't found it.
I know they have. Well, they think they have, but they haven't. No, to answer your question is they have not found an alternative. If they tried I own the euro, but if they tried to use the euro, it would not work. There is no question. There is nothing else right now. But that's going to make the situation worse. You know, and can it happen? Yes, it can happen. Once upon a time, the pound sterling was the world's reserve currency. You may know that that changed. It moved away from the pound sterling into the U.S. dollar. Well, that's happening with the U.S. dollar now.
Are you suggesting, I mean, the implication of what you're talking about is that there's actually a possibility going forward, if the U.S. doesn't get it in the way that you describe, that the U.S. could one day default?
I know people are convinced it will. Look at the numbers. There is no way in history, even in theory, that the U.S. can pay off its debt. The numbers are staggering. If they raise taxes to 80%, they still couldn't pay off the debt. They will never pay off the debt. The U.S. will default. There's more than one way to default. You can inflate. If you inflate your currency so that you pay off the debt in worthless money, there's more than one way to default.
It just strikes me that the implications of everything we're discussing are fascinating for you in your day job as an investment fund manager, a speculator, a guy who tells clients where to put money. Because if you are right, and if the dollar is on a one-way ticket to disaster, if the euro can't replace it, the Chinese currency clearly at the moment isn't working in a way which would make it a credible world currency. There's no way that people can store their money in paper currency with any confidence at all, anywhere in the world.
Eureka! You're getting it. You're right, absolutely. By the way, I don't have any clients. I only invest my own money. But you're exactly right. There looks like there's going to be a time in the foreseeable future when none of us are going to want paper money. We're going to be walking around with silver in our pockets or sugar in our pockets or something else because paper money everywhere is being debased. It is outrageous what the politicians are doing. So thank goodness you got it. Well, spread the word. Spread the word.
Thank you for thanking me. But I want to just tease out what this actually means. It seems to me, for you, the innovative investor who over a lifetime of looking for opportunity in the world economy have come up with some extraordinary and complex instruments for making money, you're now back to saying, you know what, the best thing you can do is buy gold and silver.
Well, I'm not saying it's the best thing yet. What I'm saying is, because I own several currencies, what I'm saying is that politicians throughout the world have learned how to buy votes. And they all buy votes by debasing the currency. They don't care about the value of the currency because they just worry about the next election. Now, you and I worry about more than that. I have children. We worry about our children. They don't care. They care about the next election. The way you buy votes is you debase the currency. You throw out a lot of money out the window to pay off your friends. That's not good for the world. The world is coming to a point where we're going to have to face some reality sometime in the next few years.
But coming back to my point, is your advice, both to yourself and anybody you choose to instruct, that right now the safest thing you can do with any assets you may have is put them into gold, silver, those sorts of tangible assets.
Well, probably not right now because they've been going straight up for a while. But yes, my investments, I own mainly real assets in currencies which I hope will be better than placed in the U.S. dollar, and currencies that are being debased. Yes, that's where my money is right now. I have sold short, which will make you feel better, emerging markets. I have sold short technology in the U.S.
You've sold short in emerging markets, despite everything we discussed at the beginning about your faith in the Asian century.
I'm not short China. I'm short India and other places, yes.
Do you think, a final point, do you think that, and we talked about whether publics and politicians get it, that we are going into a phase where in the Western economies there's going to be a much higher tax base, more tax paid, fewer public services, and the entire approach to what government does and how it spends its money is going to change?
Well, absolutely, because the governments you're talking about are bankrupt. And sooner or later, probably sooner, people are not going to lend them the money anymore. Plus, you're going to have much higher food prices. You're going to have prices of everything go higher. You're going to see social unrest. You're going to see social turmoil. You're going to see more governments fail. You're going to see more countries fail. Because the world is coming to a point where we got to pay the price for several decades of mistakes.
So however you try to protect a legacy for your children, it is going to be very, very tough for your children and their children.
And everybody you know. This is not going to be easy for the next 20 or 30 years.
Jim Rogers, we have to end on that somewhat bleak thought. Thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.
Thank you, Stephen. It's been great fun.
Thank you very much.